Now that we have a good understanding of variables and strings, let's take a look at the next type in PHP, which is going to be numbers. And we're going to create a new work area for ourselves. Once again, I'm going to do that by doing a save as on the file I've been working with, and go ahead and just call it numbers.php. And I'll save it in the same PHP sandbox, and I'll just go ahead and get all of this out of there so that I have a nice clean workspace to start working in, and I'll just call it numbers. Now I've saved it. There we go. So I'm going to start out by just setting a couple of variables to some numbers. And we know what numbers are. That's common sense. So I've got 3 and 4 assigned to 2 variables. And we've already seen how we could do some basic math when we did an echo function earlier and we added a couple of numbers together. And in fact, besides addition, we can do all sorts of math operations. So here's some basic math. We're going to echo back 1 plus 2 plus the variable 1, which we know will give us 3, the value that it refers to. Take all of that, add it together, then multiply it by variable 2, whose value we know is 4, and then divide all of that by 2 minus 5. And if we save that and we jump over to our web browser, instead of string functions now we're going to be looking for numbers.php. There we are. And you'll see that it comes back and gives me a result of 7. Now that makes a lot of sense to us, that we should be able to add numbers this way, and that we should be able to call up the values of variables the same way that we did with strings. If you'll remember with strings, we also did something else when we did concatenation in the strings function, where we actually updated the value inside the variable third string. We can do the same kind of thing here. Let's go ahead and make a new line, and let's put in the plus equals method. And I'm going to put in some PHP, which is going to take variable 2 plus equals 4. And then immediately after that, go ahead and echo back the value of variable 2. Now, the semicolon tells it that it's 2 separate lines, so it's no big deal that we have them all together. And then let's put a BR at the end. And let's take a look at that in our browser and see if it does what we might expect it would do. And sure enough, the string I put at the beginning there is just HTML. The value is 8, and that's what we're looking at here. It took the variable 2, whose value was 4, and it updated it. In the same way that we appended the string on, it added the number 4 into that, making the value of the variable equal to 8, and then we echoed back that variable. Now, besides just doing addition, there are a couple of other operations we can do on this. I'm going to go ahead and paste this 4 times there. The first one is going to be minus equals. The next one will be times equals, and the last one will be divided by equals. And those do exactly what you would expect. I'm going to just change the values here so that they'll actually perform those operations. And then let's go ahead and, just for variety's sake, let's make this one multiply it by 3. And then if we save it, we jump back over to our browser, and we reload it, you'll see that it took the value of 4, added 4 to it, subtracted 4 back from it, then multiplied it by 3 to get 12, then divided it by 4 to get 3. So each time we're updating the value inside that variable. So this is a very useful notation. It's the same thing as if we had actually done variable 2 equals variable 2 plus 4. It's the exact same thing, but it's a lot shorter and faster when we're just wanting to update a variable to write it this way. There's a slight variation on this as well, which is called incrementing and decrementing. And that's when we want to increment or decrement something by 1. And I'm going to go ahead and just change these lines here to be increment and decrement, so we'll remember them. And instead of doing the variable plus anything, it's just going to be variable plus plus. And if you're familiar with something like C programming, you'll recognize this. It's a very common expression. And what we're saying is take the variable 2 and increment it by 1. Just go up 1. So if your value was 4, become 5. If your value was 6, then become 7. And decrement does the same thing in reverse. And then sure enough, if we go back into our browser after saving it, you'll see that it went from our last value of 4, which was 3, not the original value, remember, because we changed the actual value already. It took it up to 4, and the next one took it back down to 3. So this notation is also going to be useful when we know just go up by 1. Let's say we're doing something like counting rows. So the first row we know is going to be 1, and every row after that we can just say, yeah, add 1 to it, add 1 to it. We don't actually have to write plus equals 1, even though it's the exact same thing. So now that we've looked at how to work with basic numbers, these numbers are called integers, They're just simple numbers. Let's take a look at something else, which is called floating point numbers. And that's what you think of when you have a decimal number. So 3.14 is an example of a decimal. And we're going to look at floating points and some of the functions that we can perform besides just addition and subtraction and basic math in the next movie.